Hello, I'm Gary Wise from Wise Law Office and Wise Law Blog. I am fortunate to be joined today by Connie Crosby, who is the principal of Crosby Group Consulting, a law librarian and well known as Canada's information diva.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome, Connie.
Thanks, Gary.
We decided today to have a chat about knowledge management. And as I said to you before we started, the genesis of this is that my office actually had a retreat last weekend. And one of the topics that kept coming up is, what do we do about our precedents? What do we do about our templates? We don't know where to find anything. So we're really very much at an entry level when it comes to knowledge management generally. I know there's a whole science out there. You're one of the experts. And I thought, let's have a chat about knowledge management, starting with what it is, what the gold standard is, and how a small firm that hasn't done anything to formalize their knowledge management in their office can get started.
One of the things that you told me was that you were worried because everything's in your head. Not everybody knows what's in your head. So
Exactly.
That's the challenge. And that's kind of where knowledge management, coming up with a definition is a bit of a challenge because it's so broad and it means a number of things. But that's really the genesis of knowledge management, was getting knowledge out of people's heads and sharing it with others so that others can find it as well. There's a whole theoretical background behind it, talking about explicit versus tacit knowledge. So explicit knowledge is theoretically the knowledge that's written down or recorded in some way, and the tacit knowledge is what's in your head. So how do you get what's in your head out so other people can find it? There are some who would argue that there is no such thing as explicit knowledge, that once you write it down it becomes information. And really part of it is just getting your information organized and findable is part of it. But then the next step is, how do you transfer knowledge from one person to another? There's also one definition that says knowledge management is about getting knowledge to people when they need it, at the time that they need it, in the form that they need it, so they can use it. So that's a piece of it, and I'm finding.
And just on that though, it's no longer about getting knowledge to the people; it's people being able to get it themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
we're cutting out the middle person.
Yeah, and I'm finding more and more in the legal industry, especially, that knowledge management is coming to mean improving your processes, improving how you do things so that they are more efficient and you have fewer steps and so forth. So that's sort of, it's becoming known for that as well. So it's quite interesting. The definition, I think, is broadening even further.
So what does the knowledge management infrastructure in the biggest, most sophisticated, adapted firms look like today?
They are going to be, they're going to have things like document management systems, intranets. Some are just starting with social features for their intranets. So adding places where people can talk to one another, whether they're a blog or a wiki or a forum, something like that. Possibly something where they can talk quickly back and forth, a bit like Twitter. So that is starting to happen. They're also doing things like document automation. It's also got, I've written down a few names: document assembly, legal form automation, or contract automation. Those sort of are all synonyms for the same thing, so that you have it streamlined when you go to create an agreement or a letter. You can actually just plug in the parameters, the client name and what the particulars are, and it spits out a document.
Right, so the basic parameters for the claim you want to draft or the agreement that needs to be drafted, that can all be automated.
Right.
And so presumably there would be some form of a catalog in a firm that they could consult in order to find a statement of claim for a certain kind of motor vehicle accident or commercial claim.
Yeah, they for years have had all of those types of precedents or model documents, and then the question is, how far do you go with developing those out? Do you just gather up everybody's best precedents and put them together so they're findable, or do you actually spend time reviewing them and honing them so that they will be the best possible, will cover any kind of different fact situation or event, and create, like you say, a library of clauses. So how far do you go? I think it's sort of you have to think about the return on your investment. How much time are you going to spend, and how much are you going to use them?
And is tagging the sort of key feature that identifies a clause that's relevant to a specific task, or?
I don't see. You mean tagging as in putting a topic, a keyword or something like that? I'm not seeing.
Or is it about whole documents?
Yeah, it's more. I'm finding more about whole documents. They're have the precedent, and then they might have a note saying, in this case, go and use this clause, that so forth. And then that's where the document automation comes in. It will actually ask you, is it this case, and it will put that in automatically for you. So the automation is a step further than that.
So the automation, the knowledge is essentially automated in a lot of regards.
Yeah.
So that the optimal clause for purpose A is easily found when you identify I'm doing purpose A.
Right. Yeah. That's precisely how it works.
And then the basic the basic variations on task A can then be subdivided essentially infinitely. Yeah. And the question is how infinite you get.
Yeah, exactly. And how far do you go? Like, do you just provide everyone with a set of, gather up your precedents that you have internally, or do you spend time editing them and so forth, and trying to find every instance that they might be used?
Okay, so if that's what the back end is doing, what does the front end look like?
It depends. If it's just a collection of documents, it could be on your share file drive if that's what you're using. If it's a document management system, it could be in there categorized as precedents, or depending on the type of precedent, contracts or real estate or whatever. If it is, if they're loaded into a database, you might search the database. If it's loaded onto an intranet, if you have an internal sort of website intranet, you maybe have them listed out so you can browse through them. And if it's in this document assembly, the front end may look like a form that you fill out. So it all depends.
Okay, so leaving aside document assembly for a second, which takes all the fun out of it. Let's look at a firm like mine, which is sort of, we've collected a lot of very good precedents, lots of research over the years. It's not well organized. So is it as simple as creating a folder for each kind of statement of claim in each area of practice, just as a starting point? So would we start with our wrongful dismissal statements of claim, and our personal injury statements of claim, and our family law applications to develop that kind of precedent, or is that way too 1980s and we need to do something different?
Actually, that sounds like, to me, like a good basic way to start. I would say you want to start off by managing your information that you already have. So I would start with what already exists, as opposed to trying to flesh out what you don't have yet, and pull that together and organize it in a way that is findable. What I recommend is, if you as a group can come together with a number of major subject headings that you all can refer to. So grouping it by topic, possibly. It might be statement of claim, or it might be in the subject area, and having sort of creating what I call a taxonomy, creating a set of subject headings that you can then use to group things together under. Now, when you get into the larger firms, they like to break them down, have subheadings, and break it down quite a few layers, but I think that starts to get too complicated fast. I think if you keep it more basic, but do organize it some way, will help you a lot, rather than having one big long scrolling list.
Sure. The corollary of that is, if you're going to maintain this just in simple Word document folders, some kind of a naming convention for documents is really what makes it findable.
Exactly.
Is that to me, that sounds like something we would try and work tags into, or the equivalent of tags, just to make it readily identifiable.
You could. If I would say, it's exactly what I was going to say next. Sort of create a standardized way to name those documents, and so that you know what to expect. You know, is it statement of claim dash, or is it the subject heading dash statement of claim? You know, figuring out how those are named, and then like you say, you can add some layers of sophistication with tags or additional subject headings. Yeah, tagging is
sure. So just
yeah.
I'm thinking quietly, and now
yeah.
I'm about to turn that to thinking aloud. If we were to organize our documents by subject area, so
Mm-hmm.
an employment law
Mm-hmm.
folder
Mm-hmm.
that would have pleadings, it would have research,
Right.
it would have other documents
Yeah.
that we would want to refer to. It would simply be a matter of doing a subfolder with statements of claim,
Mm-hmm.
and then perhaps using some naming convention to identify what makes a particular precedent important.
Yeah.
So it might be constructive dismissal.
Yeah.
It might be where there is cause alleged and there's a denial that there was cause, or simple things. We would break it down on that basis.
I think so, yeah. And the other piece of that is you'll find that firms will start to, you know, across the different subjects, they'll start to build out folders where there is no content, and there really is no point. You're better just to only create subfolders where you actually have something there.
So keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of a basic rule of building out a taxonomy as well, is you know, don't create subject headings for things that there is nothing there. You know, wait until you have something and then build it out.
So if we were thinking aloud sort of as to a model taxonomy for a small firm that's just starting out, what I'm hearing from you is break it down first of all by area of practice, and then by type of document, and then subtypes of each of those documents.
Yeah, and I would say if you only have, you know, one type of document, say one example of various types of documents, you don't need to create folders for all those types. Just keep them in the more general folder.
Let the subfolders emerge as need requires.
You know, once you start to build up more documents and you have, say, 3 or 4 of something, then create a subfolder for it. But when you just have a whole, you know, say 20, it might be overkill to create 20 subfolders, you know, one for each kind of thing. So you don't want to create too many layers if you can help it.
So again, going back to the gold standard, this is all in the back end. I presume that the key clauses are in a database so that the users can simply pick their task, go through a checklist of the special features that need to be included, and the document, at least on the document assembly side, will prepare it essentially, and then require a little bit of revision by the solicitor in charge.
Yeah, and I have seen it built out so that there's actually, if you have, especially for somebody starting out, a discussion of this is the type of document you want to use for this purpose, and oh, by the way, you know, here's a link to it. So if you have liberty to have something explained out like that, that's also nice as well. I mean, I think the gold standard, I don't know if anyone else has reached it, but I think the ultimate gold standard is to have everyone participate, to have everyone contribute and share. And that, I think, is one of the big challenges, is getting everybody to share what they know, share their precedents, and share everything else. And you know, in the bigger firms, this is a challenge because you do tend to see the knowledge management team going out and getting things from people and people contributing to the knowledge management team, but it really should be everybody contributing outright just to the system instead of handing it over and saying you put it in. It should almost be just a course of the work, like part of the workflow as you're doing the work, and as you finish something, add it in to the system. So I don't know if, you know.
I understand in big firms there can be politics around that.
Yeah.
Some people don't want their special proprietary precedents included.
Yeah.
We're not going to have that problem in this kind of a firm.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's an advantage of a smaller firm, is that you have a better knowledge of what everybody's doing a little more. I think I'm guessing you probably share a little more, know each other better than when you get into the bigger firms. The larger a firm grows, the harder it is to know what everybody is doing and to know even what they're practicing in. So I think you have some advantages there, and probably a lot of your knowledge is being shared informally. So in the bigger firms, they have to find ways to replicate that, bring excuses to bring people together to share, and also then they need to figure out ways to capture that so that future people will know that as well. So I think that's sort of the step you need in a smaller firm, is just capturing.
Well, I think you're making a really good point, though, about the importance of buy-in by all users, and essentially to make it part of the ordinary process when a new document has been completed, to at least go through the question in your mind, is this something that needs to be added to the library, or is it already there?
Yeah. Yeah, figuring out those pieces would be very helpful.
In a smaller environment, it's much easier, I suppose.
Yeah.
What about research and keeping track of research memos and the like? Does that present additional challenges, or is it essentially the same approach?
I would say the same approach. When I've done it, it's sort of considered part of the precedent system. Save down. I think one of the challenges, again, smaller firm, you have an advantage. Bigger firms, they have to think about confidentiality walls, and if they add research from a specific client and it goes into the system, can they just have the client's name in there? What happens if a confidentiality wall is built around that? In the future, how do they deal with that? So in a lot of cases, you find that the bigger firms are having to redact some of the document so that it's not identifiable back to a client, which is interesting. Whereas again, in a smaller firm, you maybe don't have to take that step.
I'm not so sure.
Okay.
I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
A new small firm might remember everybody that it has acted for in the past.
Yeah.
I'm not sure an old small firm has that same memory.
Okay, good point.
Like you said, it's all in my head, but sometimes my head isn't here.
So yeah, just you've got the specific, often the client is named, you've got the specific fact situation. So finding a way just to generalize it, and that's what I've done in the past is taking the name out, but replacing it. This was a government agency, this was a regulatory body, something like that, to generalize it out a little bit.
Use file numbers instead of file names if you need to.
Could do that.
As a way of...
Yeah.
All right. What are the nuts and bolts for getting started? Collect documents?
I think, well, first of all, I recommend a bit of a knowledge audit. Find out who has what. Who is sitting on documents, their own collection. And yes, collecting those up and then figuring out how you're going to organize them.
Okay, that's an interesting concept, the knowledge audit.
Yeah.
How does one do a knowledge audit?
Go and talk to people. Sit down with them at their computer and say, what are you working with? Get a sense of how they're working, and not only what they have, but how they work with it as well. I find that different people interestingly enough, interact with their computers in different ways. And some people are browsers and like to hunt through files. Other people are searchers. So these are things you need to take into account when you build anything, is how are people going to be finding this in the future? You take it from them, and now you have to be sure that they can find it in the future. So it's kind of two parts to that: find out what they have, and then find out how they're working with it. Talking to them about what sort of challenges are they facing, what's not working for them. And one thing that I typically look for is workarounds. If somebody got stuck one day, wasn't able to do something, and they figured out a workaround. And as human beings, we're very adaptable. We tend not to complain about this little thing that's not working. If we find a workaround, we just go with that, and we continue to do that. So that's something that I look for, is workarounds as well. I would think in this day and age, you're going to want to delve into email. How are people working with the email? How much client information is kept in the email? How are people saving that down, and are they doing that as well? That's a huge issue, especially the bigger you get as an organization.
Yeah.
Emails just has become
how to handle it, how to organize it, how to retain it, when
Yeah.
to print it, when not to print it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I've gotten into now into records management as well, because it's just such a huge area, this whole area of information overload and people saving files and email all over the place, and everybody has their own system to organize everything. So that's the challenge. And what happens, so much of our knowledge is retained in email right now, and other people can't necessarily get at your email, you know, depending on how you're set up internally. But a lot of times it's just, if something happens to that email,
Okay,
you know.
help me on this concept.
Okay.
Knowledge
Yeah.
that's retained in my emails
Yeah.
that others might want
Yeah.
to get hold of.
Yeah. Well,
what kinds of
yeah.
documents or
It could
communications
be,
are we talking
yeah,
about?
I mean, it could be an interaction with the client, and something happens to the lawyer that is working with the client, you know, maybe takes ill or something, and somebody else has to step in. How is that person going to find anything? You know, they're going to have to, I mean, I think about my own email and how hard it is sometimes to pull out those previous conversations, to backtrack. You can imagine trying to do that for somebody else's email. You know, if they haven't organized it, if it hasn't been saved down into the files. So that's a huge challenge, I think. I like to think lawyers are a little cognizant of this and do tend to save things into client files, but that is something to really look at.
Listen,
Yeah.
now that we're on this topic, do you have some thoughts about best practices then for email management and storage for lawyers?
I think it's really good to have a policy for the firm to figure it out, like how long you need to retain. Sorry, let me take a step back. What kind of email and other information you need to retain, and how you're going to retain it. And then you want to get a life cycle on it as well. You don't want to have something kicking around that you no longer need. You know, for the purpose of in case you get into a discovery situation, or also privacy as well, if you end up with any privacy inquiries. So you want to sort of have that organized so that you don't have to go through everything in the future if you get an inquiry like that. And then you also want to, like I say, put a bit of a life cycle on it. You know, how long do you actually need to keep it? And, you know, looking at all of any sort of regulation you need to follow, any sort of, you know, litigation requirements and so forth. You may not need to keep everything forever. I find law firms do like to tend to keep everything forever, but you may not need to. And so, and then figuring out some kind of a retention schedule. So you know, how often should these things be deleted, and then how should they be removed from the system? So are you going to delete them outright, shred them? Are they going to be archived somewhere? Are you going to send them to, say, the Law Society archives, for example, if they need to be? But you know what's going to happen.
Well,
so.
my inclination, given the hundreds of file boxes I've accumulated over the years, and just how dramatically that's decreased as we've become increasingly paperless.
Right.
You know, from my perspective, keeping digital archives, it's not a problem. They'll fit on one of these shelves. Yeah,
but then the question is, do you want to? So, yeah.
Yeah, and it probably would be easier to keep it than to go through it all and figure out what doesn't need to be kept.
Yeah, but like I say, if you get into, you know, a discovery situation and that, you know, that a lot of that is discoverable. So it could cost you a lot of money to have someone go through everything and explore everything you've got. Whereas if you have it organized, then you've managed to contain what they look through, and it's a lot less expensive and time
I'm assuming that there's some organization that happens before it's archived.
Yeah, okay, good.
And I'm assuming there's some organization that happens when it arrives in your office.
Yeah.
Which is ideal.
Yeah.
I guess there are some people who have 10,000 emails in their inbox, and I'm not one of those people, fortunately.
Well, that's good.
But yeah, I think that archiving digitally once you've done that organization is the optimal plan. But the difficulty we have is in dealing with digital documents like emails, the occasional snail mail we get now.
Right.
And very, very occasional. How to coordinate those, how to have those in the same place and readily accessible at the same time. And that also poses a lot of challenges.
I mean, you can, when I've taken the records management courses, one thing they say is you can, from a records management point of view, scan the paper in, especially if it's very little, and then include that with the electronic documents and call that your official record.
Yeah.
Now, you know, litigation may be different, but
that's where we're heading now.
Yeah, yeah. So
I would say that probably 90% of the documents that we receive by mail, other than bills, but from other counsel, are copies of things that have been sent digitally.
Okay.
So for some reason they'll email it and then follow it up with hard copy.
Oh, okay. So
And
that's just their protocol.
That's
Yeah.
becoming less and less so as well.
Yeah. So I would say, you know, just treat the electronic as your official record, especially if it was born digital. They obviously typed it up on their computers and emailed it to you. I would say you probably can shred the paper.
Good.
Yeah.
Is fax dead?
I like to think so, but it hasn't died. Yeah,
not.
yeah. I would say lawyers are the ones who are still using it.
I think we are responsible for the added longevity of the fax machine. I don't know anybody else.
Keeping
who
the
uses
industry
it.
alive. Yeah,
Well,
yeah, exactly.
I think that as soon as our rules are amended to permit service of documents regularly by email,
Right.
the fax will no longer be.
Yeah, yeah. I think so.
We'll no longer have to deal with the lawyers who turn their fax machines off at 5 o'clock so that nobody can serve them.
Yeah.
Did you have any questions for me? Because I've sort of posed for you
Yeah.
where we're at and the challenge that we're facing.
Yeah,
So.
I was going to ask you, I mean, how practical is this advice, really? I mean, talking to everybody, gathering everything up, organizing it. Like, do you have time to do those sort of things?
We do, and we have to make time.
Okay.
The reason the question came up is not that people don't have an idea where to find a precedent folder on our system. They do.
Okay.
The problem is there are so many precedents that have accumulated over the decades, some of which have one excellent clause and not much else.
Okay.
Some of which appear to be current, but were written for a specific purpose, so they may be missing something. And the idea that we need to develop our real precedents, our real templates that we work off of, and then know where to find them and figure out what to do with those old ones that are no longer all that applicable, because that's where people are losing time. That's where the inefficiencies are.
So you need somebody to go through them then and say, okay, this is the best of the main document, and then here are the additional
Right, I
clauses,
think that's sort of a team thing that needs to occur to identify the best of the working documents. But yes, it's totally workable what you've suggested, and I think that with a sigh of relief, it's as simple as just come up with the right folder names. And then identify your documents in a predictable way so that people can readily identify what they're looking for when they're looking for it. That all makes eminent sense.
Okay.
I understand that information technology is going way beyond that at this point, to database-backed systems and to sort of much higher levels of automation and automating legal intelligence itself, which is a really interesting topic that some say is going to eliminate all of us eventually.
That's right, Maybe.
Maybe. But at an entry point, it's really a matter about organizing your Word documents.
It really is about getting the information management under control, managing that information that you have on hand, and then you can build on that from there. I think another piece of it, I mean, you mentioned to me, how do you get out what's in your head? I think as people sit and mentor each other and talk, practice groups getting together and talking, we're so good, especially in a smaller firm, at just having that happen in a very casual, informal way. And so what's learned doesn't necessarily get captured. So the challenge is, how do you capture that? And so that's maybe something to involve everyone in. If say, one way to do it, somebody who's junior maybe learns something from someone more senior, find a way to write it down, record it, that sort of thing. If you have somebody presenting to the group or speaking on a topic, doing, I think, like you're doing here, videotaping, I think is a good way to start that, at least get that going. finding ways to do that, getting people to put checklists together. This is how I do it. This is the procedure that I follow, and here are the steps. Something like that is helpful as well. So finding ways to capture those bits and pieces, and then you can gradually add those into, if you've got things set up by topic, add those things into that system. I think would be helpful.
And it all starts with a knowledge audit.
Yes.
So this is what I'm taking, and
Okay.
This is my top 10 Connie suggestion list.
Very good.
So number one is do that knowledge audit.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk to everybody about what they have, what they need, how they would like to be able to retrieve it, and get their sense of what the ideal system would look like before you build it.
Right, yeah.
So
you may find that somebody is doing something amazing that you can replicate across the firm as well.
Yeah.
A lot of times you find good ideas
sure.
are already there. Yeah.
Everybody's doing something to be able to find what they're looking for.
I think the challenge is that you have so many lawyers who have organized themselves very well and know where everything is. And now you're going to ask them to work with a system that is put together by the firm and follow that new system. So there's a bit of change management in there. They have to buy into the reason for that. And so that's a bit of a challenge. And especially if it's somebody who's very organized and very specific about how they have everything. And they've been working maybe, 15 years, 20 years with that same system. I think that's, in law, is probably the biggest challenge.
And so do you find that in larger firms that's a big issue and people start running parallel systems, and even though there's the official system, there's really the underground information highlight.
Yeah, they have to sort of show value in having a larger, more collaborative system for everybody that they can find benefit. I mean, one benefit is, you're looking for something you don't have, and you're looking for it at 2 o'clock in the morning when no one's around. How fast can you find that thing? And that is usually where the benefit is seen. But sometimes it takes a while for that to be seen.
Are there, on that note, any search tools that you recommend on the assumption that in a small firm most of the documents, once assembled and organized and indexed, are going to be on a server? Is there some kind of a search tool that you'd recommend? I know Google Desktop is gone now.
Yeah, I don't have a specific one I can recommend at this point. I think that is, that's sort of what you are looking for, and that is in some ways the holy grail, is the ultimate search, that you don't even need to organize anything, that it will just magically find it. I don't think we're there yet, but there is, having everything organized though is a great step for whatever search tool you put in, because that makes it a lot more findable.
Sure.
The more you have it organized and with tags or keywords or taxonomy, the better results you will pull up. And there's a huge difference between Google on the web and Google internally. Google on the web relies on links from other websites to say this is valuable, this is high value information, but internally you don't have links to our documents internally. So you're missing all of that methodology for searching. And so instead you need to have something built in, some kind of structure with these keywords or tags to allow it to find it. So that's the challenge. So again, these first steps are a great way to get started with setting up your search engine.
And we'll talk about searchability again next year.
Okay.
After we've got it all set up.
Yeah. It is a challenge. I mean, if you have the file folders structure, and if you're in Windows, Microsoft has a native search tool. Some native search tools are better than others, but again, if you have it somewhat organized, then it will do a better job, whatever search you're using.
Okay. Well, I think we've covered everything that I wanted to talk to you about.
Oh, okay. I'm just trying to think if I have anything else to add to all of this. I mean, some of the big ways that knowledge management is playing out in the bigger firms, they're getting more into project management. They're getting into something called process improvement. So looking at the daily, process or tasks that you need to do to get something accomplished, and really streamlining that and figuring out ways to in some ways to automate it, if not to just make it as simplified as possible so that they can push it down to those who bill at a lower rate so that they can give savings to the clients. There's a whole push, as you know, to AFAs, to, what does that stand for again? That's
no idea.
Alternative fee arrangements.
Okay.
So
yes.
Value-based billing instead of hourly rate.
Yeah.
And so that's something, I mean, Mitch Kowalski has pointed out that that is the first step towards being able to do that, is doing the whole knowledge management piece, getting your information organized, tracking things like how long is it taking you to do work on specific types of client work, so that then you can make better estimates on how long it's going to take you, so that then you can say this is what it's going to cost the client. And then the client has a predictable fee instead of not knowing how many billable hours they're going to see back. So
I've had this discussion many times with Mitch.
Yes. So that's his theory, is that you need to put something like a knowledge management in place.
Well, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's obviously it's the backbone of the work we do.
Mm-hmm.
To the extent that we can develop efficiencies around storing it, saving it, finding it,
Mm-hmm.
using it, that's going to track into reduced time spent, reduced time wasted, and happier everybody. So
That's right.
to that extent, I think it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Why isn't anybody talking to small firms on these topics other than you?
Yeah, that's a good question. It comes up periodically, but I think there is a gap there. The big firms have been doing it for so long that they've got the 101 covered, and they're doing more advanced things like the process improvement. But how do you get started? That's the challenge, and that's what I'm hearing from people, is that, how do I get started? What do I read? What courses do I take? There are knowledge management programs out there, but they're not specific to law. So you will learn a lot in them, but the legal piece is the missing piece. And I think part of the challenge is that everybody has just learned it over time from reading and talking to one another, and no one has really sat down and recorded it in a methodical way. And I mean, I think that's probably an opportunity for someone like me, really, to get started building something out so that you and others can sort of jump in and say, okay, this is what I need to read, or this is what, the videos I need to watch, or whatever, to get started. So I think that's
okay. So my takeaway just on this is starting with the knowledge audit to find out the information that's there, how people would like to find information in the future,
mm-hmm.
and develop the wish list.
Mm-hmm.
It's a simple matter of collecting the documents,
mm-hmm.
organizing them by type, being careful about confidentiality issues,
mm-hmm.
So that anything identifiable can be stripped from it. Make sure everybody knows where to find the templates, and they should all be read-only documents so nobody can change them.
Yeah.
And develop a protocol around adding to it so that as a regular part of people's day-to-day work,
mm-hmm.
they know that when they've got something new, it needs to be part of the firm's knowledge library.
Yeah. With all of this, it's very easy to go away and work all this through on your own or with one other person and provide a solution back to everyone. But the problem that I see is that people don't adopt it. They need to have some sort of ownership. They need to understand why this is happening. So thinking about the change management piece as well, involving them. I think especially in a small firm, it sounds like you've got a group who are keen to make these changes. And so if you can involve people with the actual whole process of doing all of this, I think would be a good idea, or as many people, who are interested. But I think that will go a long way in them adopting anything that gets developed out. Problem is when you go away and sort of develop it and no one sees it until you've got the perfect thing at the end, that a lot of times gets rejected, especially in law firms. So involving everyone along the way.
And what's the kind of error to avoid then,
mm-hmm.
in terms of making it likely people are going to reject what you do?
Yeah.
Is it just undue complexity? Is that the biggest?
I think keeping it simple and communicating to them, this is why we're doing it, and hearing what, I think the knowledge audit actually goes a long way Even if there's somebody, you already know what they're going to say and you're not going to learn anything new from speaking with them, at least being in front of them and giving them a chance to explain what their challenges are makes them feel like they were involved and were heard in the process. So that goes a long way at the beginning in the communication piece, and just keeping people apprised of what we are doing and where we're at and so forth. The other thing is, it doesn't have to be perfect. Get something going sooner rather than waiting for something perfect later on. Just get something workable and going. I think it sounds like in your situation, if people are wasting time trying to find the right precedents and so forth, getting something quick and dirty up and going, and then you can work on refining it later. But I think that would be a good idea as well.
Those are some excellent tips.
Thank you.
Thank you, Connie, for dropping by to have this chat.
You're welcome.
We'll do it again in a year, and then I'll tell
Okay.
you everything I've learned, and you can tell us what we've done right and what's all right.
Very good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.